When night falls and shadows grow long, the angels of darkness emerge. These are evil things, a false reflection of life, and thus the undead walk among us. I'm Dr. William Lester, coming to you from the studio of Blackwater Media in the great city of Atlanta. Welcome to Blackwater Media's Vampire Files. My friend Mike had a certain Uncle Johnson who always kept lots of garlic at home, and there was a cross in every corner of his house. Even his fence was made up of crosses, and there was a big cross on top of his roof, just like a church. Just across the road from his house was another very old house, incredibly old. Its windows and doors were boarded up for so long that no living person could remember anyone living there, and no one ever rented it or sold it. Local people used to say that you could hear the screeching of a bat from inside the house. And many people also reported seeing the shadow of a tall and lanky man in the window on the upper floor, which was the only one not covered with boards. Now, despite the long time for which the house had not been used, it always used to look clean. There was not even a single leaf in the backyard. The bat seemed to love the place, and at night a number of bats used to appear there, as if from nowhere. According to the local folklore, the house was, quote, lived in by a real vampire. Many people were reported to have died inexplicably in front of the house. Their eyes used to be wide open, as if they'd seen something horrible when they died. It was also a site where accidents used to occur quite frequently. It was said that the vampire of the house opposite of Uncle Johnson's would only reveal his true face to his victims. People speculated that he was so ugly that people had a heart attack at the very instant they saw him, and this is why they died. Then when they were buried, the vampire would dig up their graves and suck their blood to feed himself. This is some crazy shit, I know, but this was the talk. The legend also insisted that anyone who accepted a dare to approach the vampire's door would get to see the creature's true face and would die a painful and horrible death. Would you like to give it a try? Around 11 p.m., a singer called Hanako walked into a subway station. She was there after a midnight concert and was now heading home. She sat down and waited for the train. She saw a man dressed in a yellow one-piece with its hoodie up and a parcel. He was walking in a strange way, as if he was drunk. He put the parcel down near a post and sat on it and snored. What a strange way to sleep, Hanako thought. The subway train arrived, and Hanako quickly got in, followed by the man that was half asleep. The man fell face first onto the floor of the train and started snoring. Then, he got up sleepwalking towards the freaked out Hanako and sat beside her. She tried to edge away, and then the man opened his eyes. Ha! The man's breath was terrible, and Hanako fell unconscious. When she woke up, she found a red spot planted on her arm. She was terrified and quickly went to the doctor the next day. It's a vampire tree that lives on blood. Your blood, the doctor said. Well, what are you waiting for? Take it out. I can't pull it. It hurts too much, Hanako said. We must amputate the arm from the shoulder to take it out, as its roots are long. What? The whole arm? I'm not ready. Give me a year to think about it. It's up to you. But this thing takes out 10 cc's of your blood every day. It's beyond what your body can produce. If it goes on, will have to transfuse that amount of blood to you every day. Can't you do anything else? No, that's the only way. Besides, in no time, its roots will take over all of your body. And Hanako went home in sheer terror. 10 days went by, and the roots had already taken 2/3 of her body. One day as she was singing, she suddenly collapsed as the lights went out. When the lights came on again, they found Hanako in the form of a red tree.
Epilogue, Mexico City, September 28, 2016. It's amazing how the tide turns once all is concluded and wrapped in a bright yellow bow. Suddenly, I'm no longer persona non grata down here, and there are smiles on all of the faces. Of course, at an official level, it's all straight faces and no comment. It has been made clear, and in no uncertain terms, that any published accounts of vampirism would be met by the most stringent of denials, and perhaps more. This, I was assured, came from the highest reaches of their government. Item: the bodies of Maricruz Núñez and Ana Castrillon were summarily cremated and all records sealed. Item: as for the remains of one Enrique de la Peña, all is as it once was. You won't be able to visit the gravesite because of the armed guards. The body will never be exhumed because the missing head would be difficult to explain. I can assure you that were you able to read the inscription on the headstone, it would read 1820 to 1870. That's right. Enrique de la Peña died in 1870. I'm going home because my work here is finished, because I miss my desk, my pipe, and the scent of old books and coffee. I miss the sound of rain pattering against the window just outside of my study. I miss jazz on the stereo in the middle of the day. And I am tired.
Horror of Dracula. Dracula, the most terrifying lover the world has ever known.
Who will be his bride tonight?
Horror of Dracula.
Dracula, dead and yet alive for 600 years.
Dracula, the human vampire who lusts for human blood. See Horror of Dracula. The greatest shock story of them all now achieves new heights of motion picture suspense.
See Horror of Dracula and watch the fiend who rises each night from his coffin bed to seek the rendezvous that alone can keep him alive.
See Horror of Dracula and watch those who came to destroy a monster stay to become his victim.
See Horror of Dracula.
But don't dare see it alone.
The chill of the tomb won't leave your blood for hours.
Horror of Dracula.
All new and in flaming Technicolor.
She was nervous when her husband said that they were to stay in the abandoned house, for it contained the corpse of the hermit who once lived there, enshrined in a coffin in the loft. It was an old custom and one no longer popular among the Iroquois people, but the hermit had insisted upon it before his death. There was good hunting in this place, her man had declared. And so they moved in, and she unpacked their few belongings in the front room, refusing to go up into the loft where the hermit's body lay. When her husband left to hunt, she immediately put her daughter in the sling on her back and went to look for roots and berries, staying away until her husband returned with the meat. As she prepared the evening meal for them, her husband, tired from his hunting, climbed up into the loft to rest. The hut soon filled with the delicious smell of roasting meat. She was sorting through the berries when she heard a muffled cry and the crunch of breaking bones. As she stared upward, frozen in horror, blood started to drip from the rafters. She crept silently to the far corner of the room where she could see up into the loft. A skeleton with glowing red eye sockets was feasting on the body of her husband, its teeth and chin covered with blood. Her daughter stirred restlessly at her back, and she knew that she had to get away immediately. "I'm going to run down to the stream to fetch water for the broth," she called toward the loft. "I will be right back." She took the pail and walked toward the stream, trying to appear normal. As soon as she was out of sight among the trees, she started to run as fast as she could. She heard a terrible howl from the direction of the house as the creature heard them escaping and started to pursue. The young mother stumbled desperately through the woods, the creature's howls growing closer as it pursued them. Her little daughter wailed in fright at her back as she fled in terror, sobbing, and was almost without hope. The monster was gaining on her. In a last act of despair, she shouted the Iroquois distress cry, hoping someone would be near enough to hear it. Her call was taken up and answered by warriors from the village. She could hear the creature breathing behind her as she sprinted to the trees at the edge of the village. Here, her strength failed her, and she collapsed to the ground. Just before the monster could pounce on them, a party of warriors burst through the gates of the village, chasing the skeleton away. They swung their torches wide, and the skeleton retreated farther into the woods. The warriors chased the creature back to the hermit's house and set fire to the cabin. As the flames encompassed the house, a terrible howling and roaring came from the loft, and the vampire hermit fled into the woods in the form of a rabbit, never again to plague the young woman or her daughter. In September 1954, the children of Glasgow's Gorbals district embarked on a remarkable quest that has since become a legendary chapter in the city's folklore. They were hunting a creature that had ignited their imaginations and stoked their fears: the Gorbals vampire. The Gorbals, situated on the south bank of the River Clyde, was a densely populated area known for its industrial backdrop and tight-knit community. Amid the post-war austerity, children often played in the streets, and notably in the southern necropolis, a vast cemetery that, despite its somber purpose, served as an unconventional playground. The legend of the Gorbals vampire began innocuously as playground whispers among the children. They spoke of a towering figure, 7 feet tall, with iron teeth that gleamed menacingly. Rumors swirled that this fearsome entity had abducted and devoured 2 local boys, though no such disappearances were officially recorded. The adults dismissed these tales as mere flights of fancy, but the children were resolute. They decided to confront the menace themselves. On the evening of September 23, 1954, hundreds of children, some as young as 4, armed themselves with makeshift weapons, sticks, knives, and even dogs, and descended upon the southern necropolis. The cemetery, with its Gothic tombstones and mausoleums, was shrouded in an eerie atmosphere, further intensified by the adjacent steelworks. The industrial facility emitted flames and smoke, casting flickering shadows that danced among the gravestones. One of the participants, Tam Smith, later recalled the scene. The red light and the smoke would flare up and make all the gravestones leap. You could see figures walking about at the back, all lined in red light. The combination of industrial emissions and the children's heightened imaginations created a surreal and terrifying environment. The police were eventually summoned to disperse the gathering, but the children's determination was not easily quelled. They returned for the next 2 nights, steadfast in their mission to vanquish the vampire. It was only after persistent efforts from parents, teachers, and local authorities that the fervor began to subside. In the aftermath, the incident attracted significant media attention and sparked a moral panic. Many adults pointed fingers at American horror comics, which were gaining popularity among British youth. These publications, with titles like Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror, were accused of corrupting young minds with graphic depictions of monsters and mayhem. The Gorbals vampire episode became a catalyst for legislative action, leading to the Children and Young Persons Harmful Publications Act of 1955, which sought to restrict the availability of such material to minors. However, the origins of the vampire legend may also be rooted in local folklore and the socioeconomic conditions of the time. The Gorbals was an area marked by poverty and industrial pollution. The steelworks not only dominated the skyline, but also influenced the daily lives of its residents. Some suggest that the image of a creature with iron teeth was a manifestation of the community's collective anxieties, perhaps influenced by tales like Jenny with the Iron Teeth, a Scottish nursery rhyme used to encourage children to go to bed. Today, the story of the Gorbals vampire serves as a fascinating example of mass hysteria and the power of urban legends. It highlights how folklore can emerge from a blend of cultural influences, environmental factors, and the vivid imaginations of children. The Southern Necropolis remains a historic site in Glasgow, and the tale of the vampire continues to intrigue both locals and visitors, reminding us of the enduring nature of myths and the human penchant for storytelling. In recent years, the legend has been commemorated through various artistic endeavors, including a mural near the Citizens Theatre in the Gorbals, ensuring that the tale of the Gorbals vampire remains a vibrant part of Glasgow's cultural heritage. As a paranormal investigator, the Gorbals vampire case underscores the importance of understanding the cultural and psychological contexts that give rise to such phenomena. It serves as a reminder that the most compelling mysteries often lie at the intersection of history, community, and the human imagination. I feel the best way for me to get my story out is to write it down myself. I thought of hiring an interviewer, but felt the interviewer might not survive long enough to finish his assignment. You see, I'm a vampire, and any living human is fair game, as you will soon understand. There is no sanctuary from this curse. No cure can be found, and I've had the best doctors over the endless years try to heal me. Blood transfusions only make me stronger, though they do not satisfy my hunger. I've taken every medicine invented over the many hundreds of years I have existed. Nothing has worked. I would love to exist no longer, but I've not yet found a way to die. There is a demon inside of me, and it wants to walk the earth in physical form for all time. One might think that after hundreds of years I would grow cold and unfeeling to the pain and horror I have caused countless people. That is the true irony of this curse, for I do have feelings. I do not wish to kill, but I cannot resist the great hunger that compels me to feed. The only thing I've found that will quench my great thirst is the fresh, warm blood of a living human donor. When I take their blood, I dare not leave them breathing, for that is the worst thing I could do. Once I pierce the skin with my fangs, the person either dies or goes on to exist as I do for all eternity. I am careful not to create another of my kind by not finishing the job. I must be sure every drop of blood has been drained. I must be sure that their heart beats no longer. You must think what a terrible thing I am, and you're quite right. But you must also realize that this is a curse. I have no control over my actions. When I am feeding, I feel only overwhelming satisfaction, And when I finish and look upon my victim, I feel a great sorrow at what I've done. No matter how great the sorrow, the hunger is 1,000 times greater. Even in sleep, I find no relief. For every time I sleep, I dream, and I see every soul I have ravaged. They are relentless and are always with me. I cannot forget a single one of my victims, and they are many. Each horrified face passes through my dreams one at a time until I awake from the nightmare into a true nightmare that my life or non-death has become. Now, if you will, I will tell you how I became one of the undead. I do not know when or how the first vampire was created. It is said that it was a spell cast by an evil witch on a poor, unsuspecting young man who shunned her amorous advances. It could have been someone who welched on a deal with the devil, or an alien that crash-landed on our little planet. As for me, I had a fairly good childhood, a loving mother and a hard-working father. The times were much different then. I had a job at 4 years of age, working beside my father. We were planting, weeding, and later harvesting for a local farmer. It was hot, tiring work, but I was with my father, which made me very happy and content. By age 14, I took a liking to smithing and took a job with a local blacksmith. I was in charge of keeping the fire going and the cooling bucket full of water. Every day at about 2 o'clock, Mary Armstrong would pass the blacksmith shop and peek into the open door. She would wave and smile at me with her lovely and rather toothy smile. She had a cute, small-featured, lightly freckled face. I'd known Mary since my farming days with my father. Her father had owned the farm at which we worked. I'd always been entranced by her beauty. She had long, flowing, golden locks and deep blue eyes, as deep and blue as the ocean on a cloudless day. I had had only 3 years of schooling, but I did learn to read and write. Mary had a hand in that and spent many hours allowing me to read to her. The fact that she would spend the time with me was all the incentive I needed. By age 17, I'd saved enough money to buy a little piece of earth, and my father helped me build a small cabin. I felt it was time to ask Mary to marry me, and she eagerly agreed, and we were wed in the church we had both grown up in. The whole town attended the blessed event, and the reception was held outside. It had been a beautiful warm spring day, and the party lasted well into the star-filled, moonless night. 9 months later, almost to the day, my first son was born. No words can adequately describe the love I felt for that boy. At 4, like me and my father, I was able to bring him to the blacksmith shop to work with me. My chest poked out so far with pride, I could barely see the ground. With the birth of my second son, my already overwhelming love for Mary increased as I gazed upon my wonderful family. We had it made. The blacksmith was going to move away and asked if I would like to buy the business. Even with 4 mouths to feed, I'd managed to save enough money to make the purchase. That very night, I was riding home to tell Mary of our good fortune. We'd be able to afford a bigger place closer to town, as we had outgrown the little cabin. It had only been a few moments since the sun had gone down. The road was not much more than a path by today's standards, and was lined on both sides by thick woods. Suddenly the horse reared and I was thrown to the ground. There was a loud crack, then raging pain as I realized I'd broken my leg. As I writhed on the ground, clutching my busted limb, a dark figure appeared over me. The only thing I could make out in the darkness was these red, almost glowing eyes. I struggled futilely with the creature, and it quickly overpowered me. I felt the fangs as they plunged deep into my skin and pierced my jugular. All the pain left my body as the creature relieved me of the life-giving fluid that coursed through my arteries. The bone in my leg somehow healed itself as the monster continued to slowly suck the life out of me. Unfortunately for me, a horse and buggy bumped noisily down the road and scared the monster off. You see, he did not finish the job, and I was created. Over the next few days, I began to change. Red meat became the only food that could satisfy my voracious hunger, but only if it were raw or barely cooked. Soon even that was not enough. My family that I once looked upon with love and great joy were now little more than a meal. When I began to feed, feeding was everything. There was nothing else. That night, that horrible night, still haunts me more than any other. My wife was soundly sleeping beside me when I awoke, engulfed in an uncontrollable hunger. I no longer saw my wife. I saw only relief from a great desire to feed. I did not merely drain her of blood with my newfound fangs. I actually chewed and swallowed bits of her soft, warm flesh. Due to the animal-like noises I made as I feasted, my son awoke and came into the room. What a horrific sight it must have been for a 5-year-old boy to see. He saw me as I looked up, my face covered with blood. The terror he must have felt as I slowly approached him, fangs fully extended, dripping the last of his mother's once life-giving blood. The young boy's blood was especially invigorating as I drained every drop from his pulsating carotid artery. Then I went for my youngest son. At only 1 year old, his body did not contain near the amount of the crimson fluid my wife's had. It seems though, the younger the better, as I quickly sucked down what little blood his small body had to offer. Only after I'd finished feeding was I able to realize what I had done. My beautiful wife and my 2 sons lay bloodless and dead before me, but I was full. My great hunger had been sated. Now I'm so alone. I have no friends, for when I do perchance make a friend, the relationship is always short-lived. It does not take long for my hunger to take command, and they soon become my next meal. My hunger is stronger than any friendship, and sadly, any love. So you see, it is like the wolf pouncing on the hare. He does it because it is what he must do to survive. He has no malice towards the hare, but the urge to feed is tremendous. I've tried to fight it, but alas, it is impossible. When darkness falls, I must begin the hunt. Now, like the old lion, I have grown weary of the hunt. I no longer wish to go out into the world in search of prey as I once did. Hidden in the words of this story is a code which allows me to contact your mind. If you have read this story exactly as I've written it, you can at any time come under my control. You will be compelled to come to me whenever I call. I've tried this before on a much smaller scale, and I have found it to be quite effective. I'll be seeing you. The story of vampires begins not in the dark corners of Transylvania, but in the frightened whispers of real people from real villages hundreds of years ago. It's easy to dismiss vampires as mere fiction, the stuff of Gothic novels and Hollywood films. But as a paranormal investigator, I've learned that legends rarely appear from thin air. They're born from fear, misunderstanding, and sometimes unexplained truth. The word vampire first appeared in old Russian texts around 1047 CE, described as upir, possibly meaning the thing at the sacrifice. But it wasn't until the 17th and 18th centuries, particularly in Eastern Europe, that the modern image of the vampire took shape. Far from the characteristic caped aristocrat of modern movies, these vampires were grotesque revenants, bloated with blood, returning from the grave to torment family members and neighbors. One of the earliest recorded cases was that of Jure Grando from what is now Croatia in 1672. Grando died in 1656, but according to villagers, he returned at night, knocking on doors, and even assaulting his widow. The fear escalated so much that local authorities exhumed his corpse, drove a stake through his heart, and eventually beheaded him to end his reign of terror. In the same century, in the Serbian village of Kiseljevo, another infamous case unfolded. When Peter Blagojevic died in 1725, villagers claimed he came back, demanding food from his son, who mysteriously died soon after. Several other deaths followed, and when Blagojevic's body was exhumed, it showed no signs of decomposition, with blood at his mouth. His corpse was staked and burned. These are not campfire tales. They are written in official records, signed by local magistrates and military officers. Something about these events terrified entire communities to the point of digging up graves and mutilating bodies. Of course, modern science explains much of it. Diseases like tuberculosis, known back then as consumption, devastated entire families. In 1892 in Rhode Island, the Brown family lost several members to tuberculosis. When Mercy Brown died, the local community, desperate and superstitious, exhumed her body. Finding it unusually well preserved with blood in her heart, they declared her a vampire. Her heart and liver were burned, and the ashes were mixed into a potion given to her ill brother in a tragic attempt to cure him. Beyond disease, early people had no knowledge of how bodies naturally decompose. Corpses buried in winter soil often showed little decay. Sometimes blood would leak from the mouth or nose, and fingernails might appear to have grown as the skin shrank. To terrified villagers, these were signs that the dead were still alive, preying on the living. But it wasn't just peasant superstition. Archaeologists have discovered numerous vampire graves across Europe. In Poland, a 17th century woman's skeleton was found buried with a sickle pressed against her neck and a padlock on her toe, a clear attempt to stop her from rising. In another grave in Pagzuejo, a man was buried with a sickle across his throat inside a church, suggesting even the supposedly faithful feared the undead walking again. The vampire we know today, the elegant, alluring Dracula, is a far cry from these grotesque revenants. It was only in the 19th century, through writers like Bram Stoker, that the vampire myth was refined into something seductive and literary. Hollywood, of course, took it even further. And yet, the deeper I look into vampire folklore, the more I realize how much of it was based on real human fear. Fear of death, disease, the unknown. Vampires represent something we all dread, the idea that the dead do not rest and that something hungry waits in the dark. So are vampires real? Well, for any of you out there who have followed my exploits for any appreciable amount of time, you know that my answer is yes, because I have encountered such a creature. But more than that, if you're asking whether belief in vampires changed history, ruined lives, and shaped entire communities, the answer is also an undeniable yes. The idea of the vampire was so powerful, so terrifying, that it compelled people to dig up graves, desecrate corpses, and perform grotesque rituals out of sheer desperation. For me, as a paranormal investigator, vampires are a perfect example of how myth and reality blur. These creatures do exist, but of course there are purely folkloric elements that reveal something real about us, our fears, our obsessions, and our need to explain the unexplainable.
Last time, you'll remember, he got a stake through his vampire's heart. And that would have been the end of Dracula if this bunch of rotten kids hadn't raised him from the grave with their satanic invocations for Dracula AD 1972. And all they get for their trouble is a lot of fangs right in the neck. Welcome back, Drac. Dracula AD 1972, rated PG.
You're listening to the Blackwater Media Radio Network, the finest in digital audio entertainment. This is Blackwater Media coming to you from the great city of Atlanta. When you hear the word vampire, you most likely envision a blood-drinking, undead denizen of Central or Eastern Europe. But be mindful that such creatures roamed the earth long before being associated with crucifixes and holy water. In Japan, several such beings were known of and feared. The Gaki are spirits which live in horrible torment and are afflicted with constant suffering. They look vaguely human, but they have distended, bulging bellies and tiny, inefficient mouths and throats. They inhabit a parallel realm called a Gakido. It is a barren place, full of deserts, wastelands, and other inhospitable terrain. The Gaki are eternally hungry and thirsty. There are many kinds of Gaki, each of which suffers in a different way related to the sins he or she committed in a past life. Some are unable to eat or drink anything at all. Whenever they try to eat, the food instantly bursts into flames and vanishes. These Gaki are only able to eat food which has been specially blessed for them in Buddhist services. Some Gaki are able to eat only unclean things such as feces, vomit, corpses, and so on. Others have no trouble eating anything they please. However, no matter how much they wolf down, their hunger and thirst are never sated. In some Buddhist traditions, a special ceremony called Segaki is performed during the Obon season to help ease the suffering of the Gaki. In this ceremony, offerings of rice and water are laid out on special altars, out of sight of any statues of the gods or Buddha. The Gaki are called to come and eat while prayers are said to ease some of their suffering. The realm of the Gaki is considered one of the 4 unhappy rebirths. In the cosmology of birth and rebirth, the realm of the Gaki is only one step above the realm of the Jigoku, the main difference between the inhabitants of Jigoku and Gaki being that those in Jigoku are confined to their prison. Gaki may roam free as they suffer. Today, the word Gaki is also a very nasty term for a child. This comes from the perception of children always wanting more food and never feeling satisfied with what they get. The Hanya is a Japanese vampiric demon whose name means empty, and it feeds exclusively off truly beautiful women and infants. It has a large chin, long fangs and horns, green scales, and a snake-like forked tongue and burning eyes. It represents a jealous female demon or serpent-like creature with horns, sharp teeth, and a leering expression. The Hanya mask is typically used to portray a character who is transformed into a vengeful spirit due to intense jealousy or obsession. It's a symbol of the complexities of human emotions and the consequences of unchecked desires. It attacks by giving a horrible shriek and possessing a startled woman, driving her insane and altering her body into that of a hideous monster. Eventually, it drives her to attack a child, drink its blood, and eat its flesh. Lurking along the coasts of Kyushu, Niigata, and Fukushima is the eerie and elusive Nure-onna, whose name translates to wet woman. A creature of legend, she is often described as a vampiric serpent with two common forms, either a woman's head atop a snake's body or a mermaid-like figure with a human head, torso, and arms, but with the long, powerful tail of a serpent. Regardless of which version you come across, one thing remains the same. She is deadly. One of Nure-onna's most striking features is her long black hair, which is always soaking wet, clinging to her like she's just emerged from the depths of the sea. This perpetual dampness is what gives her the name Wet Woman. She also possesses a forked, serpent-like tongue and a face often described as hideous. While she is said to be strong enough to crush a person with her tail, brute force isn't really her style. Instead, she prefers deception to lure her unsuspecting victims, draining them of every last drop of their blood. So there you have it. Perhaps you never gave much thought to vampiric creatures beyond the confines of the Carpathian Mountains. Some time ago, I did a show about the vampires of Africa. They're everywhere. So please allow me to offer you just a bit of parting advice. Bolt your doors, shutter your windows, and keep candles burning deep into the night. Here's a question. How many of you have ever thought that vampires may walk the streets of our city when night falls? Not a very comforting thought, I know. But there is at least some reason to suspect that the undead do exist among us. There's been a somewhat infamous story surrounding the masquerade in Atlanta for years now. As the rumor goes, the masquerade was wildly haunted for decades, ever since the fire and tuberculosis outbreaks which plagued the old Dupree Excelsior Mill, where up until recently, the masquerade called home. These outbreaks took the lives of countless workers inside the mill, whose spirits have been said to still remain. Another one of the most noteworthy stories to come out of the masquerade involves vampires, who seemingly live in the building, feasting on the blood and the souls of the youthful. Similar to the Phantom of the Opera, a vampire who sleeps in the shadows of the masquerade is an unusually tall, incredibly large man who is responsible for things like musical amplifiers being turned upside down, blood-curdling screams coming from all areas of the club, or unidentified footsteps within the rafters. The masquerade has been a historically prevalent place in Atlanta, yet reports of freak accidents occurring on the property throughout the years have given it an air of disaster and impending doom. Despite being a rock venue for faithful fans, many staff members reported random cold spots in the club, as well as the feeling that someone was always watching them. Now that the masquerade has found a home within another venue in town, the building sits abandoned on the street corner. While some people still believe that vampires live within the crumbling remains of the building, nobody knows for sure. Maybe it's hearsay. Maybe it's just a tall tale of vampire lore. But would you be brave enough to be the one to find out? After all, what if it's true? What if there really are vampires in Atlanta after dark? Kari Hall in Shindam, Nigeria had been owned by a family named Sonsoro for well over 100 years. But at the end of the last century, they moved out to a larger estate in Zungeru and rented the house out to two brothers, Rano and Tarka Azari, and their sister Dia. The threesome settled comfortably into the house and soon made many friends in the surrounding area. One hot day in the middle of July, the sultry air made any kind of work impossible, so the three had an early supper. Afterward, they had all sat out on the porch, relaxing in the cooler air, and watched the beautiful full moon rise and wash the lawn in silver light. After a few hours, they grew tired and went indoors, each to their separate rooms. Dia found the night still too warm to sleep. She rose and opened her shutters, returned to the bed, mounted her pillows behind her, and sat up in bed, watching the moon through her ground floor window. After a time, she began to feel herself drifting off when she became aware of two tiny lights that seemed to flicker in and out of the row of trees that separated Kari Hall's lawn from the village mosque yard beyond. At first, they seemed little more than fireflies, but as Dia continued to stare at them, they drew nearer. She saw to her surprise that they appeared to be enclosed in a dark mass of shadow, which had somehow broken away from the moon-cast shadows beneath the trees. Dia's hand went to her throat as she realized that something was approaching the house, and growing larger the nearer it came. She noticed that every few moments the dark mass was engulfed by the shadows of trees on the lawn, but then the mass always re-emerged, larger than the previous moment, and always coming closer and closer. Closer. Dia became filled with horror and felt as though she would cry out, but her throat felt paralyzed. Then she realized that any noise that she might make would almost certainly draw the attention of the thing outside. Then she realized something else. Whatever was out there would surely not be stopped by a barrier of glass panes and thin wooden sashes. Then suddenly the mysterious shape turned aside as if it were going around the other side of the house. As soon as Dia determined that the menacing figure was out of sight, she leaped from her bed and ran to the hall door. But when her fingers grasped the cool brass knob, she heard a blood-chilling scratch at the window. When she turned, she beheld a hideous pale face with burning red eyes glaring back at her. The creature began rattling the windows, which were locked from the inside. For a hopeful instant, and only that long, Dia believed that the doors might actually keep the thing at bay. But as the rattling grew into a more fervent attempt at entry, Dia resigned to the fact that escape might be a more viable alternative. She tried to open the bedroom door to flee out into the hall beyond, but the antique handle jammed, leaving her trapped in the room. The creature outside began scratching on the glass, pecking its talon-like nails on the frail panes. Then it started ripping away the lead frames which held the glass in place. Dia tried to scream, but fear would only allow a pitiful moan to escape from her lips. Then, one single diamond-shaped pane fell inward and shattered on the floor. An incredibly long, spiny finger slunk through and found the latch on the window and threw it open. Now possessed only by the most potent horror, Dia jumped from the bed to which she had retreated upon discovering the jammed door. She hoped to reach the closet, but her resolve was too little, too late. The thing exploded into the room, grabbed her by the hair with its bony fingers, and flung her down onto the bed in such a way that her head hung over the side. Then, in a moment of savage cunning, evil, and terror, the thing bit her on the throat. The stinging pain released her voice, and she at last began to scream. As she fought and struggled to push the monstrous form away from her, she could hear her brothers shouting and pounding on the door. When Rano and Tarka saw that the door would not budge, they slammed themselves against it, throwing it down by sheer force. Inside, they found their sister bleeding from the wound in her throat and unconscious. They looked outside past the open window and saw nothing. Suddenly, Rano shouted, "I see him!" He pointed to the tall figure that fled from the shadows under the large Iroko. Without hesitation, he pursued it, but the creature moved incredibly fast, with long, loping strides, and leaped over the wall into the mosque yard. By the time Rano had reached the fieldstone wall, he saw nothing save the gravestones and vaults. The thing, whatever it was, had vanished into the night. Frustrated and angry, he returned to his sister's room. There he discovered that Dia had regained consciousness, while Tarka applied a damp towel to her throat wound. We'll keep watch the rest of the night, said Tarka. In the morning, we'll take the first train back to Ado Ikiti. Rano, Dia shouted, did you find out who or what attacked me? No, Rano confessed. It escaped into the mosque yard. But whatever it was, Tarka is right. We must leave here as quickly as possible. But Dia began shaking her head. I won't let this drive us from our house in which we've been so happy. Rano and Tarka tried to persuade her to leave, but still she refused. We've leased this house for 5 years, she said, and we've been here less than 1. We can't afford to move elsewhere while paying rent on this place. Her brothers reluctantly agreed, and next morning the local constable helped them decide when he suggested it must have been a lunatic escaped from some asylum. Then he added with great authority, he's not likely to return. So they stayed at Kari Hall, but Rano and Dia switched rooms. Dia kept her shutters closed fast at night. Both Rano and Tarka kept loaded pistols nearby. Winter came and went without incident. One night, sometime around the middle of March, Dia was suddenly awakened by a dreadful scratching at her shutters. When she looked up, she saw the same gruesome, pale, shriveled face staring back at her. She screamed as loud as she could, and her brothers dashed out of the house with their pistols drawn. Tarka spotted the creature loping across the lawn and fired. The lead ball lodged firmly into the thing's left leg, and the force of the impact sent the monster sprawling, but it quickly recovered and scrambled over the graveyard wall. But this time, Rano and Tarka reached the wall in time to see the dark figure disappear into a neglected vault. The next day, in the company of the constable and several other local authorities, the vault was opened. Inside, they discovered that all of the coffins had been smashed and their contents strewn across the floor. Only one coffin lay intact, though its lid was loose. At the constable's instruction, Rano and Tarka raised the coffin lid. Dia gasped, for lying inside was the pale and withered figure that had twice appeared and attacked her at the hall. Then further investigation revealed that the left leg of the body had been damaged by a pistol shot. Now it is a fact that no one uttered the dreaded word vampire, though all knew full well that such was among them, and by common agreement they did the only thing that could permanently banish the evil that haunted them. They burned the body to ashes. After that, there were no more disturbances at Kari Hall. Africa is a land rich in beauty and history. The continent contains breathtaking landscapes and a wondrous diversity of animal and plant life. And then, of course, there are the vampires. You see, in nearly every country, every culture, and on every point of the map, you will find stories of such creatures. Africa is no different. In fact, it is argued and believed by many that the vampire itself originates in Africa. Let us now take a look at the myriad forms that the vampire takes in that place where man first walked the earth. The Obe-Ifu is a living vampire, either male or female, and was found among the Ashanti people of West Africa. The Obe-Ifu would leave its body at night to cause all kinds of terror. Its food of choice was the blood of children, but when it wasn't eating the young, it was causing slow and painful deaths. It also destroys crops by sucking out the sap and vital juices. The word Obe-Ifu comes from the Ashanti word bayi, which means sorcery. A kind of psychic vampire, the Tikoloshi or Tokoloshi, is a creature of the Xhosa people of Lesotho and the southernmost African plains. Like many supernatural beings in Africa, the Tikoloshi is a mixture of vampire and demon, and has a strong association with witches and sorcerers. In many Xhosa legends, the Tikoloshi is a demon that looks like a baboon and has a connection to water. It's described as short, bulky, and has a high forehead and balding head, and it walks around during night or day swinging its long arms like a monkey. But it has many powers, and can shapeshift if it chooses to. It can take human form, which would make it look almost normal or natural, since some of its monkey-like traits would show. It may also take the form of a big black bird-like creature with a skull head, so that it can fly over villages in search of its victims. The Tikaloshi is known for its ravenous sexual appetite, so most of its victims are women. This creature doesn't feed on blood, instead, the energy of a person, leaving them weak and sickly. If the Tikaloshi feeds too often on a single person, it can result in the victim's death. When it's feeding time, the Tikaloshi will approach a village woman at any time of the day in human form. It will greet her in a friendly, albeit sometimes overly friendly manner, maybe offering to help her carry something in return for sexual favors. If she were to say no, the beast would revert to its original horrific form and leap on her before she even had time to react. The Tikaloshi are very fast. Then it would proceed to rape her and feed on her life force. The Adze is a type of vampire creature who turns itself into a firefly or other insect to feed before returning to its human form. They can transform themselves into any number of common insects, which are seemingly harmless and very difficult to capture. The Adze have a taste only for the blood of the innocent. They are hunters of children, and only children, and they especially like to feed on infants. They can also feed on palm oil and coconut water, and will often raid a village's entire supply of these, but they become dangerously weak if they do not feed on the blood of children. An Adze can sustain itself without needing to kill any child. It can take enough blood to survive. However, if the Adze is deterred or thwarted from feeding for a long enough period of time, it will go on a ravenous frenzy for blood. Often, when the vampire reaches this stage of hunger, even the victims who survive become infected with a deadly disease which eventually kills them. The Adze can also have the power to possess a human and become a living vampire. When the Adze is captured, it will revert to its human form. A human sorcerer can also willingly become possessed by an Adze spirit for the abilities and powers they will gain. As an Adze host, they're able to change their form like a shapeshifter from human to something else by magic. When they are captured, however, the magic will be lost and they will revert back to their human form. This is the only way to destroy the Adze, but catching them is the trick. Unfortunately, there is no known way to protect against an Adze. Nothing will keep them out or keep a child safe from its attacks. The only measure that can be taken against them is capturing them and destroying their human form. The safest thing to do is keep your supply of coconut water and palm oil up and set a trap. The Ashanti also have stories of vampire creatures of the forest who are not controlled by any witch, but are monsters in a class of their own. These creatures live in nature, in the wild, and feed on passers-by and hunters. Two such creatures are the Asanbosum and the Sasabonsum, very similar in their habitat and feeding practices, though the Sasanbosum have wings and are very similar to bats, while the Ansanbosum are more like humans, save for their hooked legs and iron teeth. The Asanbosum live in trees of the forests and feed mainly on those who dare to wander into their domain. They wait silently in their trees to pounce on unsuspecting prey and rip out their throats with their teeth made of iron. This creature is a little unusual looking. Instead of feet, its legs are curved at the end like hooks, which they use to hang from the tree branches while they wait for prey to wander into the forests. The stories of the Sasabonsum are well known throughout Ghana and Togo. They also live in trees and will drain the blood of those who wander into their territory. These vampires, while humanoid, look very similar to bats. They are mostly human in appearance, with a human face and somewhat human body, save for their arms, which are short and stubby, and for the wings. Their wings are huge, Some legends claim the Sasabosum to have a wingspan of about 20 feet. The creatures are sometimes described as having emaciated bodies and twisted feet, and sometimes myths tell of these creatures having claws and horns as well, and some myths say that these also have iron teeth. Both of these vampires, though tree dwellers, are deadly and vicious. From the eastern Cape of Africa comes the Impundulu, a ravenous blood drinker. The creature is actually a witch's servant, or rather her familiar. It's usually owned by a female witch and is later passed on to the witch's daughter. For this reason, the female children of witches rarely marry. The Impundulu is a merciless killer. Entire families and herds of cattle were completely wiped out as the familiar sucked down the blood of each victim. But if the blood loss didn't kill them, it was the wasting disease caused by the Impundulu, or sometimes it left you with a horrible cough and the inability to have children, a condition known as ifika. But in rare cases, the victim got a quick death. This was called being slain by the bird of heaven, and it involved a sharp, unbearable pain in the chest or head. And there you have it. These are just a few examples of the vampiric horrors that exist on the continent of Africa. I could go on, I assure you, but the hour's late, and outside I can hear the sound of wind and rain, and perhaps the sound of something else lurking in the darkness.